Imagine a check, an ordinary paper check. Only the amount on it is $100 million. That is exactly how much U.S. Steel wrote out in 1906. In today's money, that's billions. They weren't buying a competitor. They weren't building a stadium. They spent that money to wipe a piece of desert off the face of the earth and build a city in its place from absolute zero. Gary, Indiana. It was once called the Magic City because it rose from the sand faster than any other city in Earth's history. The Gary Works plant, the heart of this place, was the largest steel complex in the known universe. It was a utopian city designed by the best engineers for the perfect life. Advanced schools that all of America copied. Wide boulevards, parks, and salaries that allowed a simple worker at an open hearth furnace to live like the middle class. It seemed the corporation had found the recipe for eternal prosperity. It seemed this union of steel and people was unbreakable. And now, look at this footage. Today, Gary is the capital of ruins. The population has collapsed from 178,000 to 69,000. In the 90s, this once Magic City earned a new, terrifying title, Murder Capital of the U.S. More than 13,000 buildings stand abandoned. Schools, theaters, majestic train stations are rotting under the open sky. But the creepiest thing in this landscape isn't the ruin. The creepiest thing is that just a couple of kilometers from the dead schools, the factory smokestacks, are still smoking. The city died, but its creator, the factory, remained alive. This is a unique paradoxical situation. U.S. Steel continues to earn billions, looking over the fence at the decomposing corpse of the city it spawned itself. This is a story of a great betrayal. Residents believed the fate of the city and the factory were inseparable. They repeated like a prayer, "What's good for U.S. Steel is good for Gary." They were wrong. How did it happen that a corporation was able to separate its profit from the people who created it? We will show you how technology, cold calculation, and racial segregation turned the American dream into a horror movie set. Part 1. Origins, Sand, and Elbert Gary. To understand the tragedy of Gary, you need to go back to 1905. On the southern shore of Lake Michigan, there was nothing. Only dunes, swamps, and wind. But this place caught the eye of one man, Elbert Gary. He wasn't a romantic engineer like Pullman. He was a lawyer, chairman of the board of U.S. Steel, a ruthless strategist who saw the world through the prism of a balance sheet. Elbert Gary walked up to a map and poked his finger exactly in the middle. To the north, the iron ore mines of Minnesota. To the south, the coal mines of Appalachia. And here, on the lakeshore, the ideal meeting point. Logistics. That's all. The corporation wasn't looking for a beautiful place for people to live, it was looking for a place for maximum margin. The engineering scale of construction boggles the mind even today. The Grand Calumet River was in the way of building the plant. What did they do? They simply moved the riverbed half a kilometer. They leveled millions of tons of sand. It was a triumph of man over nature. But there was one detail that determined the fate of the future city from the very beginning. Gary was not conceived as a city that has a factory. It was conceived as a factory to which, unfortunately, housing for personnel was attached. People were just a necessary resource, like coal or water. The city was rigidly, cynically zoned from day one. In the north, right by the water, the factory, the Holy of Holies. Just south, the so-called First Subdivision. Beautiful houses, paved streets, lawns. Management and white skilled workers lived here. And further beyond the line, chaos. Temporary barracks, chaotic settlements for immigrants from Eastern Europe, and black workers who came to build this paradise, but had no right to live in it humanely. Segregation wasn't a mistake. It was embedded in the master plan. In the city's DNA Part 2. The Ascent, the Magic City. Gary grew with explosive speed. No wonder it was nicknamed the Magic City. Thousands of people flocked here like moths to a flame. Immigrants from Poland, Italy, Greece, African Americans from the plantations of the U.S. South. They were all drawn by one thing: the paycheck. U.S. Steel paid well, very well. Not out of the kindness of their hearts, no. It was a golden cage tactic. They paid enough so workers wouldn't think about unions. But the city's main pride, its showcase, was the school system. It was created by the legendary educator, William Wirt. The system was called Work, Study, Play. Imagine an early 20th century school with its own swimming pools, its own zoos, art galleries, and blacksmith shops. It was incredible. All of America, mayors of other cities, educators came to Gary to learn how to raise the future generation. True, the goal of this system was utilitarian. Children were taught from the cradle to be ideal industrial citizens, disciplined, healthy, skilled workers for the factory. And the factory, the Gary Works plant, became the spine that held everything together. It occupied 11 kilometers of coastline, 11 kilometers of fire and steel. In the evenings, the sky over the city didn't get dark. It glowed with an orange glare from the blast furnaces. And the locals weren't afraid of this light. For them, it was the color of money. Housewives found a layer of graphite dust on windowsills every morning. But they didn't complain. This dust meant the factory was working. And if the factory is working, it means the husband has a job, and there will be food on the table. Part 3. Greatness, steel for the world. World War II brought the plant to the peak of its absolute power. Here, in these workshops, victory was forged. Armor plates for Sherman tanks and battleships heading to the Pacific were rolled. Men went to the front. Women stood at the machines. The city's population surpassed 100,000 people. Gary felt like the center of the universe, the forge of democracy. In the 1950s, the city reached its zenith, 178,000 residents. The Main Street Broadway shone with neon lights. Giant department stores, Sears and Goldblatt's, were overflowing with shoppers. It was a unique place and a unique time. The son of a simple steel worker, without a college education, could buy his own house, a new car every year, and send his children to college, simply by working at the same factory as his father. The American dream worked. The social elevator conveyor moved uninterrupted. U.S. Steel seemed like an eternal, immortal benefactor. The taxes the company paid covered the lion's share of the city budget. New libraries, modern hospitals, perfect roads, all of this was paid for by steel. It seemed nothing threatened this symbiosis, that the city and the factory had fused into a single organism forever. Part 4. Signals of change, strike and flight. But the foundation was already cracking. The first serious signal sounded in 1959, the Great Steel Strike. It lasted 116 days, almost 4 months of silence. This strike tore off the mask. It showed that U.S. Steel was no longer the almighty father. It is a tough capitalist, ready to strangle its children for profit. And it was during this time, while American factories stood still, that foreign steel began to seep into the market. Management arrogantly ignored this threat, considering the Japanese and Germans incapable of competition. And then the city split from within. In 1967, Gary made a historic choice. Residents elected one of the first black mayors in the history of major U.S. cities, Richard Hatcher. For civil rights, it was a triumph. For the city's economy, it was the beginning of a catastrophe called white flight. White families, frightened by racial prejudices and rumors skillfully fanned by real estate agents, began selling their homes en masse. They left for the suburbs, taking their money, their taxes, and their business with them. Along with the people went small business. Stores on the glittering Broadway closed one after another. Shop windows were boarded up with plywood. The city's tax base began to melt before eyes, like snow in March. Gary was turning into a ghetto. And the fault lay not in the poverty of the factory. The factory was working. The fault lay in the social divide which U.S. Steel silently observed from the sidelines without intervening. Part 5. The Fall, Automation versus Humans. But the main fatal blow was not struck by racial riots, and not by politicians. Technology became the killer. In the 70s and 80s, the American steel industry collapsed into a deep crisis. U.S. Steel began a massive restructuring. And here happened what distinguishes the story of Gary from the story of Bethlehem. In Bethlehem, the factory was simply closed. In Gary, U.S. Steel did something scarier. They modernized it. The company implemented total automation. Computers and robots replaced people. In peak years, 30,000 people worked at the Gary Works plant. By the 90s, about 6,000 remained. 24,000 people found themselves on the street. But here's the paradox. Steel production volumes remained the same. Moreover, they even grew. It was a sentence for the city. Final and not subject to appeal. The factory no longer needed the population of Gary. People became spare parts in the mechanism, a rounding error. Without workers' salaries, the entire infrastructure collapsed. Stores, movie theaters, restaurants, barbershops, everything closed because there was no one to pay. The city was left without blood, although its heart, the factory, continued to beat rhythmically. Part 6. The Crash, ghost town with a live factory. In the 90s, Gary became a symbol of national decline, the face of American tragedy. The murder rate per capita became the highest in the country. Murder capital, that's what they now called the Magic City. Walk through the city center today, the famous City Methodist Church. Once it was built with U.S. Steel money to save souls. Today, it is a Gothic ruin without a roof, blown through by winds from the lake. Post-apocalyptic movies are filmed here because sets don't need to be built. Everything is real. The small house of the Jackson family, yes, Michael Jackson was born right here, stands as a tiny, well-groomed island in the middle of a sea of boarded-up, rotting buildings. The city budget is so empty that authorities, out of desperation, began selling abandoned houses for $1. $1 for a house. But even at that price, there were almost no takers. Who needs a house in a ghost town? The most cynical sight opens up if you go to the lakeshore. You see the ruins, you smell the decay, and if you turn your head, the Gary Works plant still stands. It still smokes. It is the largest U.S. steel plant, bringing the corporation stable profit. Only now taxes are structured in such a way, and state laws have changed in such a way, that the city receives only pitiful crumbs from this giant. The corporation survived. It shed the city like a snake sheds old, dry skin. The story of Gary is a cruel lesson. A lesson that a mono-economy, dependence on a single employer, is fatal. U.S. Steel didn't kill the city intentionally. They didn't have a plan to destroy Gary. They simply followed the logic of efficiency, the logic of numbers. And when efficiency demanded removing people from the equation, the city built for those people simply became unnecessary. It became collateral damage of progress.